Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We are joined by Attorney General Nick Brown and other elected leaders and public safety leaders to talk about sort of what we're seeing, what we've recently seen in Portland, what we've seen in Los Angeles, what's going on in DC, and how it affects our state and our city. To sort of level set this conversation, at least I personally believe and professionally believe that Trump's actions are distinctly un-American. That to have to consistently sue the federal government for the actions that a president is taking, I will say is absurd. Here in Seattle and here in this state, over the weekend I had many conversations with other leaders, but here in this city, we are united. We are united with our Attorney General, Nick Brown, who you will hear from right after me. I've communicated with the governor this morning, and we spoke over the weekend. I've had several conversations with the mayor of Portland, Mayor Keith Wilson, and we are fortunate here to be so united to make sure that this kind of tyrannical style is not successful here in Seattle or in our state. I want to thank our governor and our federal delegation, our other elected leaders, and particularly our Attorney General Nick Brown for being so persistent and capable in protecting our rights here. We, to not mince words, we do not need the federal government bringing in armored vehicles, semi-automatic weapons, military personnel to make, quote unquote, us safer. There is not an insurrection here. His strategy, and I'm referring to President Trump, his strategy only serves to escalate tensions and continue to breed mistrust. Our message today is very clear. Stay out of Seattle. So in the coming days, I'll issue an executive order and detailing our plans of action, which will, of course, evolve continuously, because if there's one thing we know about the Trump administration is they throw a lot out there. They try to keep you on your heels. And that's a strategy, we think, to bring attention to his failures as a president, which I will talk about in a second. My executive order makes sure that we communicate to all of our communities that we will protect our local control. And that's why it's so critical that you have all three of our chiefs here, Chief Harrell Scoggins, Chief Amy Barton, and Chief Sean Barnes. That we will strengthen our policies to prevent unconstitutional and unlawful encroachment on the roles, responsibilities, and jurisdiction of our public safety system and ecosystem. In talking to Mayor Keith Wilson in Portland, it became very apparent in our discussion that there's not necessarily a blueprint or a playbook on how to deal with this kind of federal action. But what there is commitment to communicate very clearly, to make sure we have the legal policies in place to protect us, that we work with our community-based organizations such that people on the ground know what to do, that our police department and our other first responders and those charged with public safety know exactly what to do. We believe, once again, that these tactics seen by President Trump should be obvious to everyone. They are not presidential. The president should be trying to establish world peace. Should be looking at what's happening in the Israel-Palestinian conflict and bring peace about this world, looking at what's happening in Ukraine and bring peace about this world. The president should be helping us fund cancer research, helping us build safe roads, helping us protect our residents. They should be uplifting the immigrant and refugee communities, realizing that here in Seattle, over 140,000 residents are foreign-born, realizing that here this particular demographic has a spending power in this region reaching an astonishing $31 billion. We take pride in our immigrant and refugee community. We often lead in describing that particular community as role models of public safety and good citizenship. Many use the terms undocumented. They have many documents: mortgages, rental agreements, driver license applications, many documents. So here, we protect our residents, all of them. This president has no respect for the law. That's why the courts have ruled against his deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles. What we see in Portland and again in Seattle, as you will hear from our Attorney General, is not only unprecedented in the manner by which he is trying to do this, but unlawful. The fact of the matter is, here in Seattle, crime is down, safety is up. Violent crime is down, property crime is down, homicides are down 44% with 130 officers so far this year. Police hiring is 3 times higher today than a year ago. We are the largest city in the country with an alternative response. Third, public safety department care. Thank you again, Chief Barton, for being here. There are no insurrections here. So I repeat, our message to this president is very simple: stay out of Seattle. Now, what I do love about this city is the same thing I love about Portland. You can broaden that to talk about the Pacific Northwest. And you could even talk about what I love about this country. And that is our resilience and our consistent ability to collectively share our spirit to fight for a better city and a better community. I continue to be patriotic. I believe in a better country. I just wish that our president understood this and believed in it as well. I will ask that our Attorney General, Nick Brown, speak about his efforts to prepare the state of Washington for what comes next under the Trump administration. I would let you know that Attorney General Brown spent a lot of time together this weekend, and I want to thank him for being here, coming to City Hall to assure all of our residents and all those across the state that we are communicating with one another. And again, I talked to the governor this morning that we are communicated, and here we are joined together in a united fight against Trump. Attorney General Nick Brown, please.
Well, thank you, Mayor Harrell. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the leaders that are standing with us this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words to everyone today. I think first and foremost, there is no force in American politics that is more reckless and destructive than the current president of the United States. And I think the escalation that we are seeing in Portland following what happened in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., that escalation is part of a bigger strategy to continue to push the United States Constitution to the brink until it is rewritten in President Trump's image. We've all known this for a long time, and we have seen the signs from day one of this administration that he continues to advance the cause of authoritarianism, that he continues to expand his own executive power, and that he continues to target those that he does not like and those that he views as his political opponents. And our attorneys in the AG's office have spent an incredible amount of time, not only this year, but in the preceding year, to plan and to try to do everything we can to protect the people in Washington state and to make sure that we are enforcing the rule of law and the Constitution of the United States. We are working very closely and stand with our fellow cities in Portland, in Los Angeles, the District of Columbia, Memphis. Their experiences of dealing with this authoritarianism is informed our work. And we want to make sure that we will be ready to respond if Washington state is ever put into the same position. I think the only thing consistent from the president's policy is that he indeed is attacking the people and places that didn't vote for him or that he views as in opposition to him. And Washingtonians have spent many years loudly and clearly rejecting his vision for America. and is entirely possible based on the president's comments and those in his administration that what we're seeing in Portland will be attempted here. The public deserves to live without fear of their leaders. The public deserves an American president who aspires to be the president of all of the states in this country. America deserves a president who wants to lead and work with cities across the country, regardless of whether they voted for him, regardless of whether they agree with their policies. This is what our Constitution envisioned. This is what our people deserve. But that is not what we are dealing with right now. We are seeing soldiers deployed in American cities and massive abuses of executive authority. What I will tell you is that my team has spent much of the last few days working closely with the Attorney General's office in Oregon. I've been in close communication with AG Dan Rayfield in Oregon, and they filed a lawsuit challenging the president's actions yesterday, and I hope that that will be successful as it moves forward. Our team here has a great deal of experience in preparing and researching these issues, and we want to make sure that if any unlawful and unconstitutional actions happen, that we will be prepared to respond to that. I spent a few days last week in Washington, D.C. attending a conference, and to see American troops walking the streets and what that does for that city and the tension that the residents of Washington, D.C. are feeling and the fear that business leaders and community members and people who are just visiting that city are experiencing is unprecedented. It is un-American, and I think it is ultimately unlawful. And so anything that would be attempted here, we will be prepared to respond, because Seattle is a city that is continuing to do things and lead this city in the right direction. And all the numbers that the mayor talked about are good and positive trends that we need to continue to try to work towards and make sure that public safety and community safety is one of the most important goals of everyone in this state. We don't need the National Guard here. We don't need the United States military here. We don't need President Trump continuing his reckless and destructive behavior in the great state of Washington. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Brown. And just to reiterate, and we'll be more than happy to take some questions, that the executive order that I referenced in my earlier remarks, just to make it clear, it will establish how we will specifically communicate and protect our communities and preserve our local control. Again, there's several laws, Supreme Court decisions that we believe are consistent with protecting those rights. We'll strengthen our policies to prevent unconstitutional and unlawful encroachment on the roles, responsibilities, and jurisdiction of our police department. It will establish coordination citywide if, in fact, federal troops are deployed, and will create a task force to plan and coordinate so there is a clear process and communication systems in place. And it will ensure that our lines of communication, coordination with, again, the governor, the Attorney General's office, and the community members, and all of you are optimal. And with that, I'd be more than happy to take a few questions.
Has Seattle heard from the federal government on this directly?
I received, I think I've described it a few weeks ago, a letter from the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney, Pam Bondi, and I responded in alignment with what I've said today. That was, again, a direct communication. As I said earlier, literally, and maybe the Attorney General could address this, we get the news like you do. Tweets, news media, news articles. There's not any direct communication to speak of that you would think, which is totally distinct from the previous administration, where we are just phone calls away. Yes.
You're talking about the letter demanding that city end its sanctuary policy. Is that the letter you're referencing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you received any other communications, or what makes you think that they might send troops here? I guess is that the substance of why you think the troops might be sent here by?
Yeah. Let me address that question in a few ways. I have not received direct communications on this issue that they're coming here, but I have read many statements in the newspaper about his son calling Seattle and Portland in the same breath a crap hole. They've made direct references to Seattle in different news accounts, but I have not received direct communication from them on their plans.
What are the generals of the National Guard here in Washington telling you? You've talked with them and the governor. The AG has talked to them.
Yes, that'd be Major General Welsh, who we have a conference call established with him this afternoon. We are in communications with Major General, and we'll continue that. And that's sort of part of our pre-planning efforts. And I appreciate the governor, who again I communicated with this morning, coordinating that to make sure we're all on the aligned in our strategies. Yes, sir.
Question on court rulings. I believe the court, there was a ruling about the LA National Guard deployment that said it was unlawful. I think it might be an appeal, but my understanding is that was a ruling about the particular role that the National Guard played there. What is your understanding of the president's legal authority? Is there some window where he has the legal authority to activate troops, or does it depend on what they do? How broad is the challenge you're going to bring potentially, and what kind of ruling do you hope to get?
I mean, the President of the United States has massive authority, and rightly so, to mobilize National Guards, to use the United States military to respond to threats, both foreign and domestic. What the law requires, however, is often procedural steps, right? That when you're mobilizing the National Guard, it's supposed to work in conjunction and through the governor's office. And so that sort of communication, which did not happen in Los Angeles, is one of the procedural steps that's supposed to happen. There are legal requirements for the facts on the ground that need to exist to justify the mobilization of the National Guard, or certainly the use of United States military troops. It depends on the types of authorities that the president is asserting, whether he's initiating the Insurrection Act or some other tool. I think the problem that we see is that it's completely reckless, and there was a Washington Post story that highlighted two facts that I thought were so on point to the type of person we have leading the United States of America. One was that the announcement to that he was ordering the Department of War to use full force against the city of Portland was sent while the president was on the golf course. And just the idea that the president of the United States is taking such drastic action against an American city while he's on the back nine should alarm all Americans, because it displays a complete lack of seriousness from this president. The other part of that reporting that I thought was also very important is that it caught the Pentagon totally unaware. There was no internal coordination with the Pentagon. There was no work with them about the president's plans. It seems once again that he was watching a story or reading other things on Twitter, and that got him riled up, and then he made an announcement while on the golf course. And so when we talk about communication to state and local leaders, that's certainly not happening, but he's also not coordinating with his own people. But at the end of the day, our ability and our need to bring a lawsuit will really depend on the facts of the ground and the authorities that the President of the United States tries to claim. I mean, Seattle is certainly not war-ravaged, neither is Portland. We do not see anything happening here that would lead or generate an insurrection. Every city, Seattle included, has problems, things that we need to get better on, things that we need to improve. But as someone who lives and works in this city and walks around the city quite often, there is nothing here that would necessitate what we've seen in other places. But it wasn't there in Portland, and there's a statement from the mayor, the congressional leaders there, the governor, and the attorney general in Portland, all completely befuddled by the president's characterization of their city. And so while we don't, and we recognize that those facts on the ground do not exist here, that is not going to stop this president from tweeting something while he's on the golf course because he read something on Fox News.
Attorney General, how do you plan to protect National Guard members who may get caught between federal orders and state orders?
Well, the National Guard and the leadership of the National Guard in every state, they wear dual hats, and they are often put in very challenging position because ultimately they can work for the commander-in-chief, but their day jobs as National Guard members is under the direction of the governor and supporting things that are happening here. And so I know that they are often put in very difficult positions, having spoken and working with their leadership in prior iterations. What we want to make sure that we are enforcing the law, and so if they are called into duty for what we think is an improper purpose, then we challenge that and we go to court to make sure that they are not put into some of those difficult positions. The other thing that I would highlight is that when the National Guard is mobilized on an absurd and I think illegal purpose, they're taken away from other responsibilities, and they're not prepared to respond to other sorts of emergencies. And National Guards in Washington and every other state need to be ready to respond to true emergencies within their scope of duties. And so the idea that you would mobilize the Washington State National Guard to walk around the city of Seattle or use the Portland National Guard to walk around Portland is kind of crazy. And what the National Guard is doing right now in DC is mostly just walking around and patrolling and picking up trash and really not doing any of their core mission as National Guard members. And we don't want to see that abuse happen anywhere, in particular here in Washington.
I guess for Attorney General as well, the directive to Portland sort of specifies that the National Guard will be protecting federal interests, federal property, federal employees. Why don't they have the right to do that?
Well, I'll let AG Rayfield's lawsuit speak for itself. I think it's a solid lawsuit that our team has helped work with them on. But what we see and what was reflected, and maybe Mayor Harrell can talk about it as well, but what the city of Portland is saying is that they've got it, that their law enforcement can in fact provide those protections, and that the minor incidents that have arisen at that specific and individual ICE facility was well under control. And certainly that was what would happen here. If we needed SPD and the chief to respond to those sorts of things, we would use them to respond accordingly. And working with the other federal law enforcement officials that are here on the ground. But the idea that you would mobilize an entire military unit to respond to a very minor incident in Portland is contrary to what the people in Oregon and what people in Portland are saying is necessary, in particular the mayor. And so I think that what the president is saying just is not reflective to the true facts on the ground in Portland.
Attorney General, do you anticipate possibly joining this Portland lawsuit to prevent this? And Mayor, this is a question for you as well. I mean, we're hearing that Trump wants to remove the FIFA World Cup to Rayfield City, but he does keep unsafe. So can you elaborate a little more?
I'll just answer we won't join their lawsuit. We're not a party to that lawsuit. We certainly want to lend our expertise and assistance to Oregon or any other jurisdiction that's facing that same sort of threat, but we wouldn't be a party to that lawsuit. It's possible we could join in as an amicus counsel to help support them, but not as an actual party.
I'll respond to the FIFA games. I'm going to assume, like many things the president says, they're simply words. I don't think he has any appreciation at all for the amount of planning that's gone in with this. Actually, Seattle is one of the leading cities of the host cities. Both Mayor Lucas in Kansas City and I hosted at the U.S. Conference of Mayors the hosting cities for FIFA games. A lot of preparations here. There's absolutely no data to suggest we're not one of the leading cities to be prepared. This is huge for our region. So once again, he probably are making statements without any that are baseless statements. So we feel confident we're still ready to host the games.
Curious about the communication again. Seems like there's letters going back and forth. There's tweets. You say you're reading announcements from the golf course or whatever. Has there been any effort from either side, from you to reach out to somebody in the federal government to see if you can get an audience, if you think that's premature, or to reach out to Republican members of Congress from Washington State? I'm just curious if there's been any effort to kind of forestall this definite step.
Jim, you seem to be looking at Attorney General here, so I'm going to. I was hoping you're looking. I'll give it a shot if you want. I mean,
Go ahead.
I'll just tell you the short answer is no. No, and which is totally unlike my style of leadership. I will generally call anyone, talk to anyone. We are here to help the federal government. We're here to be partners. We need their funding. We need their support. But we do realize that just based on what we consistently see, that we have to anticipate that there's just not going to be that kind of collaborative relationship.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is also no, that we haven't done outreach to the Attorney General or certainly the White House on this. It would be obviously ideal, I think, if we had a circumstance where we had a collaborative relationship with the White House or the Department of Justice. We are, I think, in the unfortunate position of responding to illegal demands from the administration time and time again. In the last couple of weeks, they made a request for 10 years of private voter information. I think well aware that for us to provide that information would be counter to Washington state law. They have made demands that we change our Keep Washington Working Act, which provides for protections for undocumented people in the state, knowing full well that we can't simply change our laws in the way that they're requesting. And so, it'd be nice that we had a good faith working relationship with those actors. But we're also dealing with a Department of Justice that is the most politicalized department in history, that is targeting political opponents in a way that is unprecedented. And so I don't necessarily view Pam Bondi or anyone in the Department of Justice at that level as working in good faith with their state partners. That would be an ideal that I think we should hope to get back to. It has existed through parties of both sides and administrations over decades, but it is not the White House or the Department of Justice that we have right now.
I don't see City Attorney Davison here. Has there been any communication with her around this? Or her office?
I haven't. Yeah, please.
Deputy Mayor Greg Wong, General Counsel for the Mayor's Office. Yes, there has been. We're working very closely with the City Attorney's Office on all of our legal options and all of City Attorney Davison's team on that, and in conjunction with the Attorney General's Office.
Attorney General and Mayor, I just want to maybe speak to the migrant and refugee communities. How you guys, what advice do you have for them as they hear troops just a couple hours away in their communities?
Well, what we've, Jim, I want to come back to just one other thought I want to share with you on your question. I'll come right back to that. That's not to say that I interpreted your question as people directly in the Trump office. That's not to say I spoke with our federal delegation, for example, Senator Cantwell over the weekend, that we have a federal team that stays in constant contact, making sure that we have still a working relationship with the federal government. I interpreted your question's direct relationship with Trump or his cabinet members. Back to this question, we've been working with, meeting with, collaborating with as many community-based organizations such as One America, making sure that they have any tools that they need, and we'll double down on that in the executive order that I'll issue in a few days here. We want to make sure that they have frequently asked questions, legal services. I think you may recall in our budget, we increased the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs budget by 70%, realizing that their caseload has gone up. Again, we've put in legal services dollars that the council now, and again, I want to thank the council members for being here, such that they have legal recourse should they need it. So we're doing everything we can on the ground as well to make sure our immigrant and refugee communities are protected.
I'll just add in a couple things. I mean, Washington state law has remained one of the most aggressive in its protections for undocumented people. It remains one of the most robust protections in the country to protect against discrimination. Not a damn thing has changed in Washington state law in 8 months, despite the executive orders. And so I think people, one, need to recognize that there are still legal protections that we will robustly enforce to protect people's rights. But I also recognize that fear is the point. Fear is the point from this White House. That is true for Donald Trump. That is true for Stephen Miller. Every time I watch that man speak, the vitriol that comes from his mouth and his lips, the tension people are feeling is very much intentional. That is exactly what they are trying to create in this city and in this country. And again, to have a president of the United States who leads with that instinct is incredibly saddening for all of us, I think. And so we, as government officials, need to do everything we can to make sure people's rights and laws or freedoms are protected, and also work with these organizations that are dealing directly with people who are living in fear. And not just living in fear, because of something they might be doing, but when they're going to church, when they're going to schools, when they're going to hospitals. Those used to be places that were protected, where people would feel okay. But those policy provisions were stripped out by this White House and by this administrations, specifically knowing and sending the message to undocumented people that they don't have safety in those places where they're going to look for healthcare and for education for their children. And so we need to be as aggressive and as proactive as we can to counter that force of fear that is coming from Washington, D.C. right now.
For the Attorney General, you mentioned the experiences of other states informing your work. Can you explain a little more about how that might be able to get there?
No, absolutely. I mean, again, a lot of work has happened in our office this year and a lot preceding it. We have one of the largest and most experienced Attorney General's offices in the country, and we have a really robust team of experts here. And so as the first incident arose in Los Angeles, we were in contact with them to make sure that we could provide assistance if they needed. We wanted to see the way that the president and his administration was claiming authority, and so whatever authority that they were asserting, we wanted to make sure that that was matching up with what the law actually says. Knowing what facts they were saying generated the use of troops. Those are all things that we are monitoring and making sure that we're aware of, because we want to prevent any similar circumstance from happening here in Washington. So it's very, very helpful for us to look at other cities. And so, I talk regularly to the Attorney Generals of Illinois, Oregon, California, all of our colleagues across the country, to see what experiences that they are facing and to read their legal briefs and help them. And so all of that will help us, I think, if we're ever in the circumstance where we are seeing the same conduct or actions happening here.
Okay, so we're going to take one more question, and hopefully it's for the Attorney General, but go ahead.
No, it's actually for you.
Okay, I'll check.
Can you share a message for Seattle residents, just a calm, you talked about the
Thank you.
fear that's happening, calm your fear and anxiety?
Here's the calming message for the residents. Thanks, that's a perfect last question. Here in Seattle, here in Washington State, I'm going to call the Attorney General Nick. I'm going to call our Governor Bob. I'm going to call you, Bob, you, Sarah, you, Amy. We are united here. We are friends. We share the same values here. You cannot tear this family apart. We will communicate with one another. We know the law here. We are strong. We are resilient. Now, here, we should all celebrate the fact that the Mariners are hot. Seahawks are on a roll. The Huskies will bounce back from the Ohio State game. We are a phenomenal state and a city. Here we are united. We will communicate with one another. We will fight in court. We will use our community-based organizations. Our values are clear. We are a welcoming city. There is no need to be here. And we have attorney generals and governors and mayors that do not mince words. We are resilient. I want to share a personal privilege here that over the weekend, I actually introduced one of the most powerfulest fireside chats I've ever seen. And that was between Attorney General Nick Brown and civil rights leader Benjamin Crump. And what he said was, he talked about the resilience of African Americans in the context of a fundraiser. And it was a brilliant conversation. And my takeaway from that is, this is when we exercise our strength to show who we are. We can't be safe here. I don't think you've heard attorney generals talk like Attorney General Brown or mayors talk like this about a president of the United States. So my message to everyone here is, we are united and we will fight for you. And with that, everyone have a great Monday. Okay.
Question, just a quick sidebar on the potential shutdown tomorrow.
I think,
Right now.